I'll just hit record?
Yep.
Yes? Okay. Boop. Starting. Going.
Yep, that's camera speeding.
Oh, camera speeding. Yes. That's why I asked you.
And clapping for sync. Well, seeing as how I'm shooting on my apartment, this Q&A is going to be a little more fast and loose than usual. I'm just going to read some questions off my phone and we'll see if I have any good answers. All right, so I've had a lot of people ask me questions about this one, so I'm just gonna read this one specific one, but it's definitely a hot topic. What's your opinion on the whole Mario 35th anniversary rumor with 3D remasters? Now, if you're not familiar with this rumor, this is something that came out just the other day talking about the fact that for Mario's 35th anniversary, which is this year, Nintendo will be releasing a number of remasters of classic Mario 3D style games, including the likes of Mario 64, Mario Sunshine, and Mario Galaxy. To top that off, what honestly makes me more excited is the prospect of getting a new Paper Mario game in the style of the actual original Paper Mario games. Paper Mario is a weird series where it started off being basically the replacement to Mario RPG, and then it turned into other stuff down the line, especially the Wii one, which I didn't really care for. But if they do one in the style of the original or Thousand Year Door on the GameCube, I am completely there for that. Now, this is just a rumor right now. It is being talked about by some fairly credible reporters who normally are pretty on top of their sources, so it does look like it might actually be real, but as it stands, like with any kind of rumor like this, take it with a grain of salt, and we'll see if Nintendo has anything to reveal, possibly during the summertime when they would have initially announced something like this during E3, so maybe a Direct in June sometime. Do you think Nintendo will remake more Game Boy games for the Switch? I hope so. I love some original Game Boy or even Game Boy Advance titles, and there's a lot of good ones that are still stuck on that system. They ported a couple on the 3DS like they did with Pokemon Red and Blue. I hope we see stuff like that happen more often with the Switch. I don't know if it's currently on like their top tier plans to do. Obviously, we did get a remake of Link's Awakening, and something that's a little more thorough of a remake like that I would hope to see for some other titles, but I'm not sure where their head's at on it. There are some recent rumors about a lot of stuff going on with Mario games, so of course there could be that hope that maybe some Mario Game Boy titles could get remade as well, but at the time, it's just something that we're kind of hoping for, and we'll see. What are you playing during the quarantine? So I'm actually going between a few different things right now. I am definitely spending my time on Animal Crossing. That's just something I put a couple hours into every day, where I'm expanding my village, working on that whole kind of thing. I already finished Doom, at least the campaign mode. I'm done with that. I'm kind of just jumping all over the place right now. I'm working through a couple different games on my backlog, stuff that I either didn't finish or just have extra stuff I could do, a little bit of Dragon Quest on the Switch. It's all over the place right now. I think every day I've actually been playing something a little bit different because I haven't been able to rest on a single thing just yet. Excited for Resident Evil 3 Remake? Yes, that is the next game I'm planning on completely blitzing through and hopefully finishing it in time to play Final Fantasy VII Remake, because that's one of my most anticipated games this year. So I'm planning on just bursting through that during my quarantine time. That's probably gonna be my #1 game after it releases. Many people still pre-order games from GameStop to be able to pay it off over time affordably, plus the bonus of owning physical copies. With stores such as GameStop closing stores and the digital age rising, what are your thoughts on affording games? Well, as far as the debate of being able to get a hold of physical games goes, there's always going to be other storefronts that offer that, even if it's not something specialized like GameStop. There's plenty of major chains that will offer physical games like Best Buy, Target, whatever. And of course, there's also Amazon if you want to order something and have it shipped. Now, as far as the affordability aspect goes, the ability to pay something off over time via pre-order is handy, and I understand why a lot of people take that route. At the end of the day, though, you are effectively spending the same money. You're just spreading it out over a course of time. So if people just kind of set that money aside in order to do that, it's really not all that different. I think there certainly is a convenience factor that stores like GameStop offer, but at the end of the day, it's not really a hard necessity, and people are going to find a way. Now, that aside, whether or not GameStop stays open for however much longer, I do think that as the years go by, we are going to see a heavier and heavier shift towards games going just purely digital. It's something that has been slowly happening over time, and I think eventually we're going to see something that you kind of see happen with a lot of indie games, where the primary way a game is released is digitally, and for people that really want a physical copy, it'll be done in some kind of limited fashion, and maybe even just be the way they handle special editions. I don't think that's going to necessarily be a year from now or 2 years from now, but definitely within, I'd say, the next decade, maybe 5 or 6 years from now, the shift is definitely going to make a much heavier focus on digital. Favorite color? Red. If the coronavirus situation continues till holiday time, hopefully not, how much do you think it's going to affect the sales of the new gen consoles coming out at that time? Do you think the release might be postponed? I actually just did a video on this, so if you haven't checked it out yet, it's the one right before this one, talking about will this hurt the PS5 and Xbox Series X. The short version, just to kind of sum up, I think there's a possibility. I don't think that necessarily the issue is being able to make these systems. I think they already have enough kind of stuff in place to make sure that's going to happen to an extent. The bigger problem is whether or not people are going to be able to actually buy them. So I have a much longer version of that where I go in depth with a lot more stuff. Check out the video, but I think there is a chance that yes, this is going to impact what happens at launch for those systems, whether it's them getting pushed back or them being released but not really seeing the sales that were originally projected. Do you have a favorite JRPG? Chrono Trigger. There's a lot of JRPGs I love. That is probably my primary genre, or really just RPGs in general. But whenever I have to talk to anyone about what my favorite game is, especially when it comes to JRPGs, it's Chrono Trigger. Lots of honorable mentions I could make, but if I'm just gonna give you my one answer, Chrono Trigger. Absolutely. If you have not played it before, go play it. There are a couple ways you can now. The digital ports available for PC and stuff aren't super great, but if that's the only way you can access it, still do it because it is absolutely worth it. What is your biggest gaming disappointment? Oh, that's a hard thing to actually think about off the top of my head. For whatever reason, I think it's because it's just been in the news a little bit lately, or I saw an article about it or something. The original Fable was a really big disappointment for me, mainly because that was the title where there was a lot of hype up and Peter Molyneux was doing his usual heavy talking about all the insane things his game was going to be able to do, and it did absolutely none of that. I did end up still enjoying the game. It didn't like completely sour the experience or anything, but I definitely was let down by what it wasn't. And in retrospect, actually something funny about that is that it made me so disappointed in the original Fable that I loved Fable 2 a lot more because I went in expecting nothing and it was a pretty big improvement over all the stuff that was in the first one. So that was a huge one for me. And actually in a similar vein, something else that came to mind, Mighty No. 9. I am a huge Mega Man fan, and there was so much hype and hope for a new kind of Mega Man game, and it did not live up to it at all. Thankfully, Capcom did eventually make Mega Man 11, which is great, and there's all kinds of indie-inspired games out there that are awesome as well, but yeah, wow, Mighty No. 9 was not great. Oh, how'd I accidentally scroll up? Digital or physical games for Nintendo Switch? Physical, I'm a dinosaur. I'll get digital stuff if it's like an indie game, unless it's one I really like and then I want to go out of my way to buy like a limited physical release, but I'm mostly physical when I can be. It does end up having a use on the Switch, thankfully, where it saves a lot of space on my SD card and I can have even more games in my library, but yeah, sometimes I miss going to a full digital because it is easy to swap between multiple games, but I like my physical copies. Why did you stop making your legendary Best Games of 19XX series? That was awesome back in the day. If you're not familiar with these videos, these are some ones I was doing before the channel really started to grow a lot. I had a lot of fun making those. I was definitely a little more rough around the edges as far as video content went back then. I like those videos, and I do oftentimes think about doing some kind of new pumped up version of it. Truth be told, back then they just didn't do great. Like even by the standards of how well my channel was doing back then, they just did not perform at all. And so it kind of hit a point where while I had fun making them, I was like, it's just too painful to see the actual return. So I don't know, maybe it'll something that'll make a comeback while I'm in quarantine. We'll find out. When will we get Kevin without a hat? 1,000,000 subs. Or you just look far back enough in my vids. But if you want to see modern Kevin without a hat, yeah, 1,000,000 subs. That's the plan. What is currently your favorite console with the leaks given? So before I dive into my answer for that, honestly, at the end of the day, I care more about games. Specs are cool. I am excited for a system that is powerful, that'll allow it to push games to some kind of new level, but at the end of the day, games are what I actually care about. And we don't really know a lot about that right now for each system. Both of them, I think, have a total of one game officially announced with some very light, at least cinematic footage being shown. We haven't really seen any real gameplay for any titles just yet. So with that in mind, just going off of tech specs, the Xbox Series X sounds really exciting to me. Between the two, I am looking more forward to that one, but there is still so much we don't know about the PS5, and again, it's ultimately gonna come down to those games. So yeah, leaning towards Series X at the moment, but that is very capable of changing. What happened to Little Town Hero? It came out and no one cared. Yeah, it was all right. I played it a little bit. What N64 games would you like on the Switch? Me personally, GoldenEye and Rogue Squadron. Great choices. honestly, both of those are ones I would like to see. If I only had to pick one or a small handful though, I think the first thing that always pops in my head is Star Fox 64. I absolutely love Star Fox 64. The more I think about it, it might actually be my favorite game on that console. It got released on 3DS already, so I think there's already some work that's been put in that could just also bring it over to the Switch, possibly. I would love to have that. Aside from that, there's a lot of other great N64 games we're talking about. Obviously, both Zelda games, Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. Those also got remade recently, but having them again on the Switch would be awesome. Yeah, those ones would probably be my main ones, and then to top that off, GoldenEye and Rogue Squadron, also awesome choices. What's the last Game Boy game you played? Depends on what we define as Game Boy. Are we talking just Game Boy specifically or all the way through for Game Boy Advance? Because if we're talking about Game Boy Advance, the last thing I actually played was Sword of Mana, which isn't my top favorite Game Boy Advance game, but the reason why I went back is because I went on a whole kick of playing all the different Mana games once the collection came out, and I'm excited for Trials coming out. So as part of that, I ended up playing Sword of Mana again, which is still fun, just not my top favorite. If we're talking about original Game Boy, the last thing I played was Link's Awakening because I was revisiting it for when the remake was coming out on Switch, and I just really wanted to compare them side by side. When do you think Forza Motorsport 8 will release? Do you think it will be a launch title on the Series X? Yes. That is, if there is anything that has been just a continuous Forza release on Xbox, it has been Forza. So much so that I'm actually really surprised we didn't get one last year, but they were consistently going back and forth between Motorsport and Horizon. I think the reason why they skipped last year is because they're saving Motorsport 8 for Series X, and it will more than likely be a launch title. The timing just makes way too much perfect sense for them to not do. The only reason why it wouldn't be is because of that hanging question everyone has right now is, will coronavirus affect the release of something? So if it's not a launch title, it'll likely be sometime soon after because it got lightly pushed back. What is the most overrated Nintendo IP? Oh man, it's time to make some people angry. All right, if I'm being completely honest here, and keep in mind, I'm saying overrated. I'm not saying bad, but I'm saying overrated. Pokemon. Look, I love Pokemon. I have picked up Sword and Shield. I played through it. I had fun with it, but at the end of the day, Pokemon is just kind of fine, you know? I feel like the series hasn't done anything extremely interesting or super cool in quite some time. The games have just kind of been a continual, I got my fix, I played a new one, that's great. None of them have truly blown me away since probably Heart Gold, Soul Silver. I really loved those ones, and ever since then, it's just kind of felt like, yeah, we got a new Pokemon game, that's cool. So, yeah, they're good, they're just not amazing.